Hey, this is Michael from Scientific Triathlon and the author of this training plan. First of all, thank you very much for choosing this plan. I need to adjust my volume on my microphone, I noticed, because it's starting to sound a bit too loud. Some technical issues here as we start this video, but there we go. I think this will be good. Yes, so thank you for choosing this training plan. This video will be quite long. We will go through a lot of things that you should be aware of when doing this training plan if you want to get the most out of it. Because a training plan is not a recipe that you just follow 100% and you get a very predictable outcome. You need to actually be accountable to yourself, and you need to hold yourself accountable to being smart with how you use the training plan and using it as a tool to achieve your optimal results. And in this case, that will be in 16 weeks when you do your half distance race. So some things that we will talk about, and I'm going to just start listing tips basically and things that you should be aware of. The first thing is that there will be a video for every single week. This is week 0, you might call it, the introductory video. But every single week we'll have a video where we might talk about things that are relevant for that week, some specific workouts, or just the general theme of the week. They will be shorter, and there won't be too much information in them, but they will still be important for you to be aware of what you should think about and consider in each and every week. So always watch those videos and do it before you start with the week. So maybe watch them on a Friday before you start the next week on Monday. Of course, with the workouts, you might be surprised that I say this and that it's not obvious, but actually read all the instructions of the workouts carefully. You'll be surprised how often people don't do that. And I learned that through experience, through emails and messages that I'm getting. So please read the workouts carefully so that you actually execute the workouts correctly and don't just blindly follow something, whatever your Garmin might say or your friends might say. Actually, the most important thing when it comes to reading your workouts is reading the description here. So not reading the structured workout segment here, or the details down here, or the title here, or whatever the TSS is, that's irrelevant. The duration is very relevant. This is just automatically calculated and makes no difference whatsoever. This is what you need to really pay attention to, what it says in the description here. And in this particular case, this is what's important. And it might even be that I have calculated the distance wrong for a swim. Actually, if you have your training peaks set to yards, then it will say something like 1,600, 1,700 yards instead of 1,500. But then when you calculate these things together, you'll find that, well, this is just 1,500. Just swim the workout in yards and follow it as per this description, and you will get 1,500 yards. And it doesn't matter that your training peak says that it should be 1,600 or 1,700 yards. Of course, if you want to add that, feel free to do so. I'm absolutely not against adding 100 yards or 200 yards so that you match sort of what the metric system users are using. That there's nothing wrong with that, but the point is, don't be obsessed about those things. This is what you should slightly obsess about. Not obsess about it, but you should pay very close attention to it. The next point that I want to make is that at the beginning of the plan and roughly midway through, in week 9 actually, you will do testing, so a swim test, a bike test, and a run test. And these will help set your thresholds and set your zones. And it is very, very important that you, especially in these workouts or tests, that you follow the descriptions very carefully, but then that you follow the descriptions for how to actually use them. And I have to admit, in the swim, it's not so important, because there the main interest really is when you get to week 9, how much have you improved your 400 and 200 meter times? Because the workouts, at the end of the day, you will do mostly by your perceived effort. You won't be really following any particular zones. It's more about focusing on what is easy, what is hard, what is moderate. But in the bike and the run, you will be following zones. You might be following heart rate or pace or power. So that depends on which version of the plan you chose. But to get those zones and those thresholds right, and let me say that if you don't have your threshold set correctly, then all of these structured workouts, you can just ignore them because they will be completely wrong. They are solely based on you having your threshold set correctly in your Training Peaks settings up here. So you click here, click settings. It will look different for you in the athlete view compared to the coach view for me, but you'll go to the settings and then the zones, and that's where you set them. So do the tests as described and follow the instructions. There is a calculator to set your zones. I'll show that in another video, but you will use those for the bike and the run to set your zones and then go to Training Peaks and update them. So that's the next thing that I had as general. Like, if definitely pay attention to your thresholds and zones, but also if you get to, let's say you get to week 5 and you start to feel, or week 4, and you start to feel already that, wow, this zone 4 workout on the bike, it feels super easy. I probably improved a lot on the bike, and it feels like I can do it with the same effort at 10 watts higher. If you're using heart rate, you might not have that problem. It will be the same heart rate. You'll just be stronger or faster. But if you're using power, you might see that, yeah, I'm 10 watts stronger than I was at the beginning. So feel free to manually adjust your threshold. Bump it up by 10 watts. There's nothing wrong with that. The only thing that's wrong is to just blindly follow the numbers, but then the perceived effort changes. So you're actually not working at the effort that you should be working at. You're not doing hard work in the hard workouts. So that's what's wrong. Bumping up the thresholds manually, nothing wrong with that. Or just focusing again on the RPE, because here I do have the description here as well, the perceived effort description. This should feel quite hard. It shouldn't feel super hard, but it should feel hard. So there you go. That tells you a bit about the thresholds and the importance of keeping them updated, or at least, if you're not keeping them updated, not being a slave to the numbers. Well, that was the next point on my list, actually. I'm looking up a bit because I have a second screen above my laptop. That's where I have my notes. So the next point I wanted to make was, do not be a slave to the numbers. And I see this most, again, in the structured workouts. People get hung up on the structured workouts and don't focus enough on what's the actual description. What are we actually trying to achieve in this session? We are trying to achieve 15 minutes easy. It should feel easy. It should be easy. And then 30 minutes at an uncomfortable but sustainable pace. And that will be your zone 3. If you do those things, you can't go much wrong. Where you can go wrong is if you have your threshold set incorrectly, and then you end up having incorrect numbers here, and you blindly follow these. So I definitely don't recommend that. There are other options for how things can go wrong as well. I've heard about athletes that always push the structured workouts to their Garmin to follow the Garmin workouts. And I do not recommend that, because what I think happens is that actually Garmin uses the threshold you have set in your Garmin, which is just another point where things can go wrong. So then they end up getting different pace guidelines, and they don't do the workout as prescribed at all. So do not do that. I highly recommend, do not follow structured workouts. Do not push them to your Garmin. You can have a look at them because it's highly visual, but you should have your threshold set correctly. You should read the description, and then you go out and do the workout. You have manual laps set only on your watch. You don't lap every single kilometer or mile or anything like that. You press start when you go out and start running. You press lap after your warm-up, which can be 15 minutes, or maybe you want to make it a bit longer. That's totally fine. You can do that if you don't push it to automatically run through the workout in the Garmin. And so you go through the warm-up, and then you press lap, and then you go through the main set. And maybe you feel so good that you want to do the last hill as well as part of the main set. So you end up going 32 minutes instead of 30 minutes. That's fine. Small adjustments are fine. And you press lap again, and then maybe you have a couple of minutes to jog home or something like that. So you shouldn't feel that you need to be very rigid, super rigidly following your plan. Although, as I will get to in a minute, compliance is the main factor of how successful you'll be following this plan. So I hope that helps describe a bit of what I mean with don't be a slave to the numbers. Equally, don't be a slave to the plan. Hold yourself accountable to it. Try to follow it as much as possible. But if you actually have a day when you're really tired, maybe you have been traveling for work or something like that, and you feel that, well, you really can't do a hard workout now, it would not be productive, then just do that workout as an easy workout instead. Maybe you come home on the first day from work travel, it's nighttime or evening, and you have this workout scheduled still to do, and you feel that there's absolutely no way I can do 3 by 8 minutes as threshold, as tired as I am after 2 days of long business meetings and 2 long haul flights. Maybe you just decide to do it as an easy workout, and perhaps what you do then is to move this workout from Thursday to Sunday instead, and do the main set here, the 3 times 8 minutes, as part of the endurance run, and then you maybe even extend the run so that you do the same duration as planned, 1 hour 15 minutes. So that's an option you can do if you then start to feel good again on Friday and Saturday. But don't be a slave. Don't come home and be super tired and feeling that there's no way that you can even train potentially. That is an option. You might need to take a rest day actually and not just remove intensity. So you need to always be in tune with your body and not be a slave to the plan, even if you're trying to be as accountable as possible. And then just do the best to maximize your adaptation, not maximize your training. And one final thing here, not final thing, but one more thing is to every weekend, or it may be Friday, you should look ahead to the coming week and plan how you're going to accomplish this week. So look at your own personal calendar, your work calendar, your family calendar, and your training calendar, and plan your workouts as appointments. That's how you're going to be successful long term. That's how you're going to get consistency. That's how you're going to be compliant to the plan. And also, that's how you're going to give yourself the best chance of not train too much, not overtrain, because you're going to have a training plan that is laid out so that you have a nice mixture of low intensity work and high intensity work in a good ordered way, so that you don't do too much intensity on too many consecutive days. So that weekend planning session or Friday planning is very important to give you consistency. Then we have the next, just looking through the list here. The most common mistakes and how to avoid them. So I'll quickly run through them. And that would be, first, not doing the work. So missing too many workouts or changing them so that it's not what is prescribed. I would like you to follow, I actually need you to follow at least a 90% compliance to the plan for you to be able to say that that you have actually been following the plan. Any less than that, and it's just not good enough. 90% is actually still, it still allows you to miss a fair amount of workouts, because you might be doing on average 7 or 8 workouts per week. So over the course of 3 weeks, you could miss 2.5 workouts, or change 2.5 workouts, and that would be acceptable within the limits. And I think that that's where we can draw the line. That you should be able to change that much, and that's totally fine. You might need to change that much to be able to work it with your life, but much more than that, and it's you're really not following the plan. Maybe 85%. I might let that slip. That might be okay. But any less than that is definitely a no-no. So keep that in mind. And that is your main key performance indicator for how well you're doing. It's how well are you actually following the plan? What is your compliance? Then the next thing we have, sorry, I'm starting to sound a bit congested. I'm having some allergies here. So apologies for that, but I'm not going to re-record the video as I already started and got fairway into it. The next one is to not do your easy workouts too hard and not do your hard workouts too easy. So actually do your easy workouts easy, do your hard workouts hard. For example, endurance run, zone 2. This should feel easy. This should feel like an RPE of 4 out of 10. So you should be able to talk in complete sentences when you're running or riding in zone 2. So definitely very sustainable, something you could do almost all day long, something that it feels like you could sustain for a long, long time. On the other hand, when you come here to Tuesday's bike workout, as I describe here, the perceived effort should be hard. So we're looking for a session RPE maybe of a 7 out of 10 or an 8 out of 10. In some workouts later on, it will be a 9 out of 10 even, perhaps. So you don't need to go to a 10 out of 10. You don't need to kill yourself. You should not kill yourself, except maybe in the time trials. There you can kill yourself a little bit. But other than that, make sure you could do maybe one interval more or half an interval more or something like that. But definitely you should have spent most of your energy and be quite tired and have given most of what you were capable of on that day, but not quite all of it in those hard workouts. So session RPEs between 7 and 9 out of 10 are appropriate for most hard workouts. Then the next mistake is to not practice race-specific aspects like terrain, weather, fueling, hydration, equipment, bike position, the time trial position, and doing brick runs after biking. So for example, I don't really, in most of these workouts, or I don't think that I'm actually prescribing race-specific training in very few of these workouts, if any. But that doesn't mean that you shouldn't do it. That's why I'm telling you now. So I am prescribing, but I'm prescribing in this video. When you get to workouts like long rides, like this 2 hour 45 ride, and you get to a 3 hour sweet spot ride with 4 by 10 minute intervals, you should take these workouts as opportunities to practice your race fueling and your race hydration. And that means that pretty early on in the plan, you should have an idea for how much you're going to eat, consume, and hydrate with in your race, so that you can actually practice that and then change accordingly as you go through the plan. Also, if you know that you're going to be racing in hot conditions and you have the opportunity to train in hot conditions, try to use that to your advantage. The same sort of thing with terrain. Don't stay on the indoor trainer if you're going to race a hilly race and you have hills in your region so that you can actually train on hills. Go and try to get that race-specific training on the weekends. You don't need to do it during the week, but in the long rides on the weekend, definitely try to do that. And so on and so forth. Definitely the same thing goes for the bike position. So practicing the time trial position a lot, both indoors and outdoors. Practicing any equipment that you will be using, like behind the saddle bottle. If you're going to do a flying mount, for example, onto your bike with a behind the saddle bottle, that's something that needs to be practiced. And the brick runs that are prescribed, you should do them as brick runs, so that you actually practice running hard off the bike after a long and potentially hard bike ride. And not all brick runs will be hard, by the way. Very few will be, actually. I think it's only one. But just the act of going out and doing an easy zone 2 brick run after a long bike ride will be quite a good stimulus. So you should not wait and do this later. You should do this directly after the bike. Let me see here. So the other mistake that I mentioned, and I mentioned this already, is to use the structured workouts incorrectly. Again, you have to set your thresholds in your Training Peaks settings to be able to even rely on these numbers in the first place. But even if you do not leave your brain at home when you go out and train, do not rely on your Garmin, do not push through your workouts to your Garmin. Keep these workouts. These workouts are simple. Workouts don't need to be complicated. You don't have a lot of things that you need to remember, so you can easily remember all of it in your head and just go out and do the workout and press lap when needed to, and that's it. So that's how you will execute the workouts the best. And the same actually goes for, I definitely do not like erg mode, and I don't think that you should, if you want to get the most out of the plan, you should not use erg mode, because that tries to nail you to one single power number, and that's not the idea. You will find that you have a specific range of power or heart rate that you'll try to hit, and that will be more than enough. And on some days you'll feel great and you'll hit the upper end of that range, and on some days you'll feel not so great and hit the lower end of that range. Both are fine, but if you're using erg mode, you will be nailed to that one single number every single time, and that might be wrong every single time. So don't. I would highly encourage you to not use erg mode. And finally, let's go through a little bit of a plan overview. This will be brief, so because it's not really relevant for how you do the plan, but it might be interesting for you to know. So first of all, one thing to remember is that the majority of the work in the plan will be endurance-based work. So zone 2 low intensity. There'll be some zone 1 as well, which is also low intensity, but even lower sort of recovery. The zone 2 is your tempo or your intensity, where you can actually have a conversation without having any issues with breathing or anything like that when you're out running or riding. And that is something that doesn't tax you hormonally, muscularly, neuromuscularly, or structurally very much. So that's a very safe and sustainable intensity to hold. That's why the majority of the work is at that intensity, that lower end, zone 1, zone 2. And that's why you need to make sure that whenever you are prescribed zone 1 or zone 2 work, you keep it zone 1 or zone 2. Then in terms of the intensity, the quality workouts, we periodize that. And actually the way that I prescribe it is that the first few weeks after the tests, of course, we start to gradually build into higher intensity. But on the bike, we start immediately with zone 4, which is quite high intensity. On the swim, we start with progressive work, which is sort of zone 4 to zone 5 in this case, even zone 6 potentially. And on the run, which is the most risky, the most injury prone, we start with zone 3. But then all of those disciplines, we progress up. So on the bike, we progress to zone 5, VO2 max. On the swim, high intensity zone 4, like longer zone 4 workout. So that's actually progressing down a bit in intensity, but progressing up in workout demand, I would say. The run we keep a bit the same, but we alternate these kinds of weeks for a while until we get to a point where you're doing actually, let me see here. Here we're getting quite a big dose of VO2 max work on the bike. So zone 5 on the bike and on the run, and on the swim, and on the run we're up to zone 4 threshold work. So we're also increasing the intensity on the run, even though it's up to zone 4, not zone 5. Then we're getting to a recovery week here. So we do have some recovery weeks. That was week 8. We get the retest week. And as we get to week 10, that's when we start to work more on sustained moderate intensity. So sweet spot on the bike. We go back to longer tempo work on the run and tempo work on the swim as well. We keep doing quite a lot of that tempo work and the sweet spot work, and strength work as well, work with paddles. And then we move into race intensity, which is potentially even slightly lower than sweet spot. So that's in week 13. So we're only 4 weeks out from the race at this point. So race intensity, race pace on the swim, race pace on the bike, on the run. And we keep doing that in week 14 as well. And week 15 is when your taper starts. So intensity goes way down from 11 hours at its peak to 9 hours. So it doesn't go way down at first, actually. It only goes way down in the second week, but it goes down. And also the intensity changes. So we want to make sure that we maintain intensity and maintain fitness as volume goes down. So we increase the intensity a bit and go above threshold. So this is like low zone 5, high zone 4 on the bike and run to really stimulate that VO2 max. And same on the swim, a progressive swim there, plus some race pace here as well. So a bit more intensity on the swim, which is the least taxing. And we do the same in the final race week, but obviously with less work. So 5x3 instead of 6x5, and 8x2 on the run instead of 5x5. So the same philosophy holds there. We try to maintain a high intensity, but the rest is very easy work, and the volume is very low so that you will be fresh for your race. So as I said, as I went through here, we have a retest in week 9, midway through the plan. But as I also mentioned, feel free to update your zones outside of that test week if you feel that your thresholds have changed and it's appropriate to do so. The intensity is always present in the plan, except for maybe in the recovery weeks that we have. You probably noticed that we can do a bit harder work on the bike and swim, and a bit more intensity on the swim and bike compared to the run, just because the run is the most riskful in terms of injury. So that's why we take it easy with the run, and you can also get a lot of crossover effect from the bike and the swim to the run. We do have regular rest days. We have rest days in quite a lot of the weeks, but not every single week. So it's modulated, and it will be enough as long as you make sure that you do the easy workouts easy and the hard workouts hard. Then it should be enough for you with the amount of rest days that we have here. But if not, maybe you have a very hard work schedule, then as I said, you need to adjust the plan to yourself and maybe take an additional rest day every now and then. The general philosophy here towards the end is more and more race-specific training the closer we get to the race. and you're practicing race intensity also in this latter part of the plan. When we get to, let's say, week 10 or so, this is when it becomes super important to really practice those things that I already mentioned: race equipment, race fueling, hydration, race specific terrain, etc. So that is very, very important. And one more thing that I almost forgot to mention, but I had it noted here and I just noticed it. In terms of terrain, especially on the run, but also on the bike, when you're doing your outdoor workouts, perhaps on weekends, try to include variable terrain. So on the run, including a lot of hills in your endurance runs is absolutely fantastic. Fantastic way to build strength. The same goes for the run, or for the bike, sorry. On the run, try to include different surfaces as well. If you can run on soft surfaces, on grass, on dirt track, that's amazing to make sure that you minimize the risk of injury. So even though in some other plans I've actually specified a lot more that I wanted to do this endurance run on hilly terrain, I have not done so in this plan, because just from feedback that I've received from people that do not have hills available in their area, they feel like they're failing with the plan if they don't run hills. That's why I have chosen not to prescribe hills. But for those of you who have hills in your area, I would highly encourage you to run hills as much as possible in endurance runs, also in tempo runs. You can do a hilly tempo run. You don't need to be blindly focused on pace. You can go 15 minutes at a moderately hard, uncomfortably but sustainable pace, and go up and down, and always push the effort a bit, but make sure you push the effort equally on the, or more or less equally on the up and the down, so that you don't go too hard up and too easy down, but modulating it and learning how to run on terrain, but also building that extra strength that running on hills and riding on hills gives you. So that, I think, was the final note for this introductory video. Thank you for watching through to the end. Good luck with the training plan. I'm looking forward to hearing your feedback, and I'll see you in the video for week 1 and the rest of the weekly videos for this plan.